this island, which had been this island, which had been like paradise for beekeepers, no mites, none of the major diseases, you know, and we got Nosema serrana, which is a more virulent. It's like a chronic form of Nosema. That's more. It comes from Apis serrana, which is a different species of bee, an Asian honeybee. And Nosema apis was the one that the bees was pretty much. If your bees got that, it was just because they were chilled or whether their immunity was down, but they could recover. You know, this one is like a chronic weakening in life, shortens their life. You know, we got that probably about 2000, probably before we got the mites, but people didn't know about it. They didn't know what it was. And then we got a few years ago, maybe 3 years ago, Oahu started finding varroa mites on their bees, and then they quickly spread to the Big Island. And then, so now we have Nosema, and then varroa mite, and the viruses that varroa carries that cause the bees to have HIV type problems. And then just about a year ago, small hive beetle was found. So we've had a triple whammy of really bad things. And just the small hive beetle then, you know, our bees were just reeling from people didn't really even know about Nosema. The bees are reeling from the mites, and then they get hit with the hive beetle, and it just went across the island. People lost all their hives in a week. They lost like 100 hives in a week, and it hit Hilo and Puna first, and now it's they're island wide pretty much.
What does the mite do to the bee?
The mite it's like a little tick. It sucks on their body fluids, feeds off their body fluids, and the female mite lays eggs in the brood just before the cell is covered. The larva cell is covered or capped, and then she'll lay eggs in there, and then the developing mite larvae feed on the metamorphosing bee pupa. And so a lot of times they're born, you can tell that there's been a heavy mite infestation because the bees have little miniature wings. They're like shriveled up little wings because of this virus.
What does the beetle do to the beehive? And
then the beetle it's a small little black, you know, it's about the third of the size of a bee, and it's basically like an opportunist. It can smell a distressed hive the way sharks smell blood. So a hive that's weak or queenless or stressed because it's been handled roughly or knocked over or something, the beetles will smell that alarm fear. They'll smell it, and they can fly 15 miles to get to that hive. So then what they do is they'll find a dark corner, which is why the bees are making a hive without dark corners, I guess. They'll find a dark corner to hide. The bees oftentimes will cage them in there with propolis. It's oftentimes between the lid and the frames. So the bees cage, though they might cage like 100 beetles up in there, and then when the beekeeper lifts off the lid, they release all those beetles into the hive. So it's really and healthy hives that then naturally swarm and leave half their population behind, and a hive full of honey and pollen, that gives the beetles opportunity to start laying eggs in the honey. The bees can't keep them all off, and they'll lay eggs in the honey, and the larvae start to eat their way through the pollen into the pollen in the brood, and they just slime out the hive. It looks like when you open a hive that's been killed by hive beetles, it looks like the carcass of an animal that's filled with maggots. It doesn't smell that bad, but
so it's actually.
I'll show you the larva.
It's the larva that does the damage.
On those larvae. That's what you should experiment on.
Yeah, I think they'll be easier with the frequency treatment.
Yeah. But the queen will stop laying, and they interfere with the pheromones in the hive. The beetles do. so the bees that were so weak, you know, they were easy. They were already sick, and the beetles the population of beetles just went through the roof. You know, my neighbor lost probably 100 hives. Big, he had large hives with lots of honey and pollen in them, you know. And he went away for 3 months, and he lost 100 hives, and all of those beetles pupated, you know. So I find lots of beetles in my hive, but my bees, I have to play my Sanskrit chants, but they seem to still have the traits that they need. These wild bees.
Do the beetles themselves harm the beehive, or just the larva?
No, just the larva.
Okay.
They actually prey on the body of the bees. It's a superorganism. So the honey, the pollen, the wax, that's their physical. That's like their physical body, like their skeleton. And then the bees are like the blood, or almost like the. You know, they're like almost like the spiritual part of the beehive, of the organism.
So how many bees are in a typical beehive?
Between a typical beehive, between like 30 and 50,000.
Oh, that's a lot. And they're, in a way, they act as one organism?
Yeah, they are one organism.
They are one.
Yeah, they're a superorganism. So we are, like, if you look at biology, biologically you have these layers of complexity that life has built up over eons of time. Life has become more and more complex, holding energy in ever more intricate patterns, yeah? So the first thing is like the unicellular organisms, a simple algae, or lives by itself, reproduces by splitting, you know, replicating its chromosomes and then splitting in half. And then you have animals that form tissue, simple, like, you know, like a sponge that just has like an epidermis and just a few different kinds of cells. They're grouped together, and the cells are, certain kinds of cells are tissues, right? and then you get organs, another layer of complexity, animals that are complex enough to have organs, right? And specialized tissues that do specialized things in a whole body of an organism, another layer, right? And so that's the layer that humans are. Well, we are further than that, but we aren't consciously further than that. But we have our, you know, we're like organisms, so we have this ego, and we have trillions of cells that are all acting as if they're one when they're really individual living beings, right? And so the bees are one more level, right? They're our superorganism, which is, these guys have collectively formed one organism, and there's the bees are like the individual cells of our body. So what is it that tells them that they're all one? That is the queen. It's the queen substance. The queen produces a pheromone called queen substance, what we call queen substance, and she also uses vibration on the cells and pipes, and she'll vibrate the comb, and so she's basically emanating this energy field that is in keeping them all one. So when a hive goes queenless, the beekeeper can tell, because they act totally different.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and they cry.
The bees cry, or the queens?
The bees, when they lose their queen.
Oh, how can you tell?
You can hear it. So they sound different.